wanted to ask you, Angela Davis, about the monuments to racists, colonizers, Confederates that are continuing to fall across the United States and around the world. In St. Paul, Minnesota, Wednesday, activists with the American Indian Movement tied a rope around a statue of Christopher Columbus and pulled it from its pedestal on the state capitol grounds. The AIM members then held a ceremony over the fallen monument. In Massachusetts, officials said they'll remove a Columbus statue from a park in Boston's North End after it was beheaded by protesters early Wednesday morning. In Richmond, Virginia, protesters toppled a statue of Confederate President Jefferson Davis from Monument Avenue Wednesday night. In the nearby city of Portsmouth, protesters used sledgehammers to destroy a monument to Confederate soldiers. One person sustained a serious injury, was hospitalized after a statue fell on his head. In Washington, D.C., House Speaker Nancy Pelosi joined other lawmakers demanding the removal of 11 Confederate statues from the National Statuary Hall in the Capitol. Meanwhile, President Trump said he will not even consider renaming U.S. Army bases named after Confederate military officers. There are 10 such bases, all of them in southern states. Trump tweeted Wednesday, "These monumental and very powerful bases have become part of a great American heritage and a history of winning, victory, and freedom," unquote. Trump's tweet contradicted Defense Secretary Mark Esper and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General Mark Milley, who suggested they're open to discussion about renaming the bases. And a Republican committee in the Senate just voted to rename these bases like Benning and Bragg and Hood that are named for Confederate leaders. Meanwhile, in your hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, Angela, comedian Jermaine Johnson's pleading not guilty to charge of inciting a riot after he urged protesters at a May 31st rally to march on a statue of Charles Lynn, a former officer in the Confederate Navy. Did you think you would ever see this? You think about Bree Newsom after the horror at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina, who shimmied up that flagpole on the grounds of the South Carolina legislature and took down the Confederate flag, and they put it right on back up. What about what we're seeing today?
Well, of course, Bree Newsom was a wonderful pioneer, and I think it's important to link this trend to the campaign in South Africa, Rhodes Must Fall. And of course, I think this reflects the extent to which we are being called upon to deeply reflect on a role of historical racisms that have brought us to the point where we are today. You know, racism should have been immediately confronted in the aftermath of the end of slavery. This is what Dr. Du Bois's analysis was all about. Not so much in terms of, well, what are we going to do about these poor people who have been enslaved so many generations, but rather, how can we reorganize our society in order to guarantee the incorporation of previously enslaved people?